Welcome to Command Shift Left, the podcast that helps you navigate the treacherous waters of the software development, ops, and security world while also diving into the hot current trends in the industry. Join myself, developer Philip, our co-host or Vice.
Hey audience!
As we battle through hilarious real-world stories, pro tips and hacks for navigating your way around developer security, learning about our Shift Left life, and life stories that have saved our ass. We have an absolute pleasure hosting two guests with us today. First of all, we have Zohar, the co-founder and CEO of Port, who claims that DevOps is dead. So I'll be interested to hear more about that later, Zohar. And we also have Aliam with us today, the CTO and co-founder of Argon, who got acquired by Aqua Security, where Aliam continues to work today. So welcome, guys. It's a pleasure having you on the podcast today. If you guys would be willing to give us a short introduction about yourselves. So maybe Zohar, if you want to go first.
Yeah, of course. So thank you for having me today. So I come from a software engineering background as a developer, which I always like the space of developers and thinking like a developer. I was 5 years at the IDF. Thereafter, I joined the TLV Partners as part of the VC, mainly responsible for the technical due diligence for our companies. After TLV, I joined Rookout, one of our great portfolio companies, as their first employees, where I met Or. So it was a pleasure working with Or and now doing this podcast together. So thereafter, I started my first company, Aporia, in the MLOps space. And today I'm working with Jonathan on Port, a company in the space of platform engineering, providing their teams to build their own IDP in seconds.
Elam?
Yeah, sure. So Elam, I used to be an engineer in IDF Mamram, so kind of a similar track there in the beginning at least. Immediately after my service, I joined forces together with Elon, which was my co-founder when we started Argon, a software supply chain security company. I was the CTO and co-founder there. And today, as you mentioned previously, I lead the same group in Aqua Security. Fun fact, when me and Elon just started, Zohar was kind enough to host us in kind of a very small space in the corner of his first company's office. And this is where Argon was originally born.
That's awesome. So I think now, without further ado, let's jump to our facts. And the first fact for today is Zohar's. Zohar, take it away.
Amazing. So the first fact would be that many software leaders today says that DevOps is dead.
Yeah.
So now the entire industry is panicked about it, and people think that the DevOps might go home. But I have an interesting point of view on that. But this is something that everyone is talking about today.
So tell us more. So if DevOps is dead, how are we supposed to set up our cloud deployments? How are we supposed to get our servers running? What's the deal there?
Yeah, so basically, if you think about it, we were promised with you build it, you run it, right? In the early days of DevOps.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, we did a lot of things in the past few years, like big revolutions like microservices, infrastructure as code, multi-cloud architecture, GitOps, Argo CD, Kubernetes, and the list goes on. Right, and developers simply lost, their way understanding what's going on and how do I do stuff against DevOps to deliver software. So they simply started opening tickets to DevOps where they lost all their autonomy. And for some reason, we are in the IT days, opening tickets and having phone calls to DevOps, and developers simply are not provided with the autonomy they were promised with. Right. So this is the reason why people say DevOps is dead, but actually I really think that DevOps is just evolving into the next phase where you can provide them with easy to use, off-the-shelf services in a unified platform called an internal developer portal, where they can regain their autonomy using that, reducing the cognitive load of the developers using this kind of platform, where the DevOps and the platform team are responsible to provide them with this easy to use, off-the-shelf services by using an IDP.
Yeah, so it really seems that, well, at first I was a little worried that you've had such a bold claim. I was worried that you're suddenly going to end this podcast and Zohar is just going to get cancelled. But right now it's not going to be the case because you explained yourself quite well. So what you're saying is that the approach to DevOps now is that the way we kind of think about it and the way we implement it is much different, right? It's not what maybe we were taught a few years back.
Exactly. Developers were introduced with a huge cognitive load that is caused by the complexity of DevOps and the innovation of DevOps. Now it's time to think about your developers as your customers and provide them with a product they can actually use. And this is where the entire industry goes through.
In general, this new mindset, at least how I heard it references platform engineering. You think about providing a platform and not just providing specific ops services. And I actually think it's very natural progression to DevOps. Like the first mindset with DevOps was to have an agile mindset, to be able to run quickly. I keep thinking of this book, The Phoenix Project. If you haven't read it, you really should. It's basically a novel about agile development or about DevOps. Maybe you should start calling it a novel about platform engineering. I don't know. But the idea there is that it's a novel, so they go about investigating server crashes like murder cases, and throughout the way learning how to work in an agile fashion with deploying software. It's a very cool book. And there it's really about how you manage the work in progress. How do you give the right interfaces to the different people on the team so they can get the ops services that they need? So I think DevOps in some degree was always around these kind of concepts, but now we're maybe shifting this and maybe also getting back to the source, right? With DevOps, the idea was that developers do ops and not just have developers and IT people throwing requirements and tickets between one another over the wall. That's the figure people usually use. So I think this still does that, just with, I guess, more emphasis on automation and actually packaging things and not just having raw infrastructure being used by the different people.
Are we seeing a lot of platforms come into space like no code in the DevOps community? Is that something that's becoming more significant now?
Yeah, now companies are shifting their engineering structure into the platform model. So imagine like you have teams within, like autonomous teams that each one works on a different application. And to become a real owner of your application, you do need a certain control over the ops point of view of your development, right? But you cannot be an expert of all the ops depth and the details that you need to know about setting up the pipeline for yourself. So you have like an autonomous team with some ops persona, a DevOps, that is consuming different services from the platform team that provides the commonalities for all the other teams to be using, right? So this is how you balance the level of understanding and the level of expertise of DevOps to the different teams to be autonomous, and you put all the deep stuff packaged as part of the responsibility of the platform team.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Zohar, I just want to write on your comment there for the DevOps is dead statement. Like the way I think DevOps was not only about like a technological solution, it was kind of an even organizational culture stuff, mostly in the beginning, but even today. So if back then an engineer would have to walk to the other room where a wall, literally a physical wall, separated him or her from the designated IT engineer. So this is a path they would have to take in order to set up like a server for the new application or for the new service. Right. So the DevOps, kind of the fusion of the words, was meant also to indicate kind of the breaking of the barriers, of the logical, of the physical barriers between developers and the operation side of the business.
Right.
And it made a lot of sense, and it kind of created the hype around the DevOps as a movement, I would say. And today, kind of maybe into it, I feel like there's been a major change. So there are much more kind of DevOps engineering conversation. However, maybe now, kind of with developer portal, this is the new wall that is now about to be broken, kind of, and maybe this is why some people kind of say DevOps is dead. Maybe it's not that DevOps is about to be gone, but rather it's the new kind of obstacle that is now standing in the way between engineering and DevOps, which is about to be kind of cracked. So this is how I see it.
Right.
So what do we call it now? Do we call it DevOps is to be resurrected or something like that?
So I think we'll have both. We'll have platform engineering and we'll have DevOps as a culture within the organization that is responsible to build the ops side of your application. So these things will play together.
If I'm a DevOps engineer, like before I was an IT engineer, I went quickly with the DevOps revolution. I went quickly into my LinkedIn. I replaced the title IT manager or administrator, replaced it with DevOps, and I got like another 10K in my salary. Should I do the same now with platform engineering? Will I get more money?
No, because what's
the point? What's the point?
No.
You will actually have in organizations both DevOps and platform teams. So the DevOps will be responsible for consuming the things from the platform as part of the autonomous team, and the platform will be responsible for, the common denominator of ops that all the different teams need, right? So you'll have both. So if you want to change your title, you'll also have to change your team.
Okay, that's fair enough. I think this would be a good point in time to move to our second fact. And the second fact that we have for today is from me. And my fact is that software development is getting more specialized. And here I'm going to share a little bit of my experience and history, again showing that I'm too old than I should be. So back in the 90s, when we were building software products, we were literally building often also the operating system when we were delivering that product. Nowadays, of course, who the hell would build the operating system? That's just too much work. In the 2000s, it was customary to build the application completely on our own. So no open source, no third-party services. We already used a good server and operating system, like we use like IIS or something like stupid like that. Sorry, Microsoft. For running the software, but the entire software we built all the code from scratch. The most that we were willing to take in was like the runtime, like the C runtime or something like that, or the Java framework. No Spring framework, even just Java. Maybe Tomcat. That was, like if you were brave, Tomcat was considered bleeding edge technology, which now sounds stupid. In the 2010s, it started to be customary to build on top of open source. So Tomcat and Spring Framework and Flask and Django and a bunch of frameworks and also software tools like FluentD and later Elastic and things like that became a good baseline to build our software on top. Instead of writing every single line of code on our own, we started to embed software that other people wrote. And nowadays, it's becoming even more specialized as services that we're building today are built on top of other people's services, other SaaS components. So you don't do authentication on your own. You don't do building on your own. You don't do databases on your own. You don't even host a database on your side. You consume it as a cloud service from your cloud vendor, or maybe even a different company as an external service. You don't do CMS. All of it you consume as services. And this is something that at Pyramid we obviously think a lot about because we're providing a service like that. We're providing authorization as a service. And I think it's kind of interesting to ask, where is this headed, right? We keep specializing our software more and more. What's coming up next? And I'd love to also hear from you folks. What is your experience, sir? Did you experience it the same way that I'm describing it, or are you seeing it differently?
I mean, I personally just think it's very fascinating to kind of if you put it into perspective, what has happened is it started off as engineers being provided building blocks, essentially the code to build an operating system, and now we've moved so far that we're using the code to build building blocks to build other code, so that we can use all these technologies and combine them together to produce something that works. Now, I mean, if you kind of think about it in this abstract level, it's kind of crazy what we're doing. We're essentially re-innovating what we had previously to something new.
Yeah.
So it's just very impressive to see. Where will this go further? I mean, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. It's going so fast that it's very hard to predict, right?
Yeah, I think it's kind of cool. It's kind of like, yo, dog, you like services, so I put services in your services where you're building your services. But to be honest, it's not really new, right? It's basically what humanity has been doing from day one. Like, when we were hunter-gatherers, so initially everyone would both hunt and gather, and there weren't really any tools. Like, you hunt an animal with your bare hands or by throwing a stick or a rock. And then one day, as you're a very strong hunter, someone comes to you and says, "You don't use stick anymore. I make spear. Spear is stick with stone that I make. You much better than you. You don't need to make stick anymore." And then you're like, "What? I've been making my own sticks since the dawn of time. Like my father and my fathers all been sharpening their sticks on their own, and now there's this guy is only gonna do sticks all day." That's kind of odd, but yeah, when you try that spear, suddenly it's easier to kill that mammoth than with the lame stick that you had, and from there it's just like better sticks all the way up.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's still, it's kind of hard to say where this is going.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where this is going. I think nobody really knows where this is going. I will say that I'm glad I did not write software in the 90s, because there's no way I would reading any part of the operating system, and I'm really glad that I don't have to operate a spear, because I'm pretty sure I would suck at it. So I'm grateful that we are living in the area where we can consume services, and it's essentially taken for granted, right? Because if an engineer is now learning how to code, then they will spin up like an entire development environment in a heartbeat. From their IE, which is browser-based today, to the cloud resources where you can consume with a single click of a button, and up until the application services, so authentication, authorization, you name it. So that's a good phase to be in and to create software with. I believe it is kind of a positive direction that the technology community is headed towards. However, it does come with a lot kind of lack of challenges.
Right.
So one of the main challenges today, obviously where I operate in, is security. So if you consume kind of another person's spear, then you don't really know the materials that they used to create it. Some of them might not be appropriate to the specific kind of operation that you want to do today.
So it's kind of like, how can I trust that spear that that other person has made?
Exactly. And you have to either trust it and use it, or you can stay behind and keep doing your thing. But the competition will, they will run forward and they will use it.
I think you can test the spear. That's maybe another thing that is worth talking about. Testing services that you didn't build. I think I want to try and maybe give a prediction here. I think that the next step, so up till now we've been embedding services that were basically puppets. You ask the service to do things, but it does exactly what you ask. I think the next step is embedding services that are driven by machine learning components. Kind of like ChatGPT, which is now widespread like fire everywhere. So first of all, probably every product will need to have some kind of AI agent as part of its interface. And B, will probably want the services to be more independent, to solve things with more flexibility than just what we define with an API. Because the problems that we need them to solve for us so we can build our product are constantly getting more complex, bigger. We're hunting larger mammoths, so to speak. So yeah, that's my prediction there. Let's check in with me in like I think 2-3 years and let's see if I was right or wrong.
2-3 years, that's an optimistic prediction.
Yeah, that's part of the prediction.
Speaking of ChatGPT, I've got an interesting thing that I'd like to kind of share with you guys. And it's kind of, it almost made me a little worried, I guess. Maybe not worried, but it was quite impressive. You all of you heard of LeetCode, right? LeetCode is the platform for like learning your algorithms when you're starting or applying for job interviews. And I thought I wanted to test ChatGPT with the most difficult problem on LeetCode, the most difficult algorithm. Now, the cool thing about LeetCode is for every solution that you provide, it gives you the time complexity or how long it took to execute the algorithm, but it also gives you how much memory it took up. Now, I took the most difficult problem, and the cool thing about LeetCode is that it gives you rankings of all the people in the world that produced this problem, and they ended up having a solution for it. And I asked ChatGPT, I essentially literally copied the whole question, put it into ChatGPT and saw what solution it came up with, ran it, ranked like mid in the algorithm. But then I told ChatGPT, how can we make this better? Like what kind of different logic or algorithm can we use? And ChatGPT came up with a solution. He said, we can use this, and that. And I was like, okay, well, go ahead and implement it now. And it did. And I iterated twice on that, just twice. And kidding you not, I literally got the fastest time and the best memory consumption for that algorithm on the whole of LeetCode.
Wow.
Now, tell me AI is not kind of going to kill some people off. I mean, what?
Hopefully, it won't kill them off. Maybe take their jobs,
well,
not literally kill them. But yeah, that's fascinating. I think like maybe if any of us or anyone listening, if you go to a job interview, just answer with ChatGPT, and you can use it as part of your work as well. So I think it's a win-win.
Yeah, I think like I personally use it for many kind of tasks, but I really try not to like take his answers for granted. Like I really put like a huge question mark on the outputs. Sometimes I even drop the entire answer that I get, but it is a meaningful way to be more efficient. At least I'm really happy to have this kind of tool in my tool set. But I take what it says like with a grain of salt, just like I do with humans as well. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that the answers or the communication is flawless and complete, but it's more of kind of like the indication that we could be creating something that is extremely powerful and we haven't seen anything like it yet. It's kind of like the first kind of shining light there. I do believe AI stuff and technology based on machine learning algorithms would not be the end of humanity as we know it. Probably not in the close 2 or 3 years where we'll check all prediction. But it is going to be very fast, a very powerful tool in our toolbox. And we would have to learn how to utilize it, how to use it. It probably can kind of replace existing skill sets that are required with other skill sets. Like it does a very good job of rephrasing my emails to be more formal, which is an extreme time saver. But my engineers use it too. So engineers like playing with it to find solutions to their problems. So as Zohar said, it's not that they can copy paste it directly into the code base today and it will work flawlessly, but it is another kind of superpower that if mastered correctly, then could put you kind of in a whole other level of mammoth hunting.
I love how all the references get connected. And with references, one of the things you mentioned is that you have a fact, Elam. So I think this is a good time to move to fact number 3. And Elam, the floor is yours.
Okay, so I have multiple facts. I'll touch on one that was interesting for me to better understand. The previous fact that I wanted to mention was about open source software in general. So you mentioned that it was one of the phases in software development. We can see that those phases are definitely here to stay because the fact that is in open source, in software today in general, it is estimated that 70 to 90% of it are built with open source code, so someone else's code. And this is an estimation by the Linux Foundation. So you can trust the foundation. And it just goes to show how much of dependencies kind of we are operated in order to create the best software, the fastest, which is a great step. However, as I said before, it comes like with cost. So you have to know how to operate it well. You have to know how to test it, to verify it for security purposes, for operational purposes. So this was kind of a opening statement for the fact that I wanted to touch with you today, which is the ratio of DevOps engineers to software engineers in modern company today. Do you have any guesses of what is the average ratio?
I'll take a guess. I mean, I have absolutely no idea, but I'll take a guess.
Yeah.
I'm going to say 40% DevOps and 60% software engineers. How close am I?
Not too far away.
It's a good guess.
I think just kind of to give the ratio itself. So firstly, today we divided to startup companies and kind of more larger companies, so small, medium businesses. So in a small, medium business, the ratio is 6-1, meaning that if you have 6 software developers, then 1 DevOps, which sounds not too bad. In startups, the ratio goes way down. So it could be 15-1. So if you have 150 developers, then you would have only kind of 1 to 15 of a DevOps operating the entire kind of operation and infrastructure of it.
I pity that person who has to deal with the demands of all those engineers. 15 engineers clamoring at,
Yes, exactly.
when do I get my server? God damn it.
We just met a company of 10 DevOps engineers for 500 developers.
Oh my God.
So it was like, at some point in time, the Slack went nuts, and you see how many messages they get. So he said, like, give me a second, let me mute on my channels so I can be with you. So it's not linearly growing with the number of developers, and DevOps is also a very rare resource.
Well, that's like what 1 to 50? That's like taking care of 50 children at once.
Yeah, you really need to be like.
What do you think is the best ratio? Like, what is the, not best, I'd say ideal. Like if in a utopia where you can tweak it out every team, what would be the ratio you think?
Depends whether or not you have like a platform engineering solution, right? That kind of, that should affect the ratio.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
But that's cheating, I think.
Yeah. So I think like every team should have every development team should have at least 1 DevOps.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say 1 to 20. I think it's fair enough.
So you think it's kind of like an organizational structure thing? Like it doesn't matter how many engineers are on the team. Like if a team does something together, they should have a DevOps person as part of the team.
Exactly. Like you want to have the full stack, as part of your team to be autonomous. So part of it is DevOps. So you got to have 1 per team.
I'd like to be kind of old school in answering that question and say, I want a super kosher orthodox DevOps, which means that you have a 1-to-1 ratio, but you achieve it by having every developer being their own DevOps. So there's no like a separate person doing DevOps. There's only devs, and they do both dev and ops, and God help them.
So essentially you're saying just 100% software engineer.
100% software engineer that has ops capabilities. Like back in my day, if you wanted to set up a server, you go, you buy the CPU, you build it, you build the machine, you set up the electricity, you set up the networking. When I say full stack, I literally mean the entire stack from like the lowest, simplest thing in the front end to the nitty-gritty details in the hardware. That's the actual full stack. I'm joking, of course.
Right.
Yeah, I think you might be joking, but I think there is kind of a mindset regarding what we expect our engineers in general to be able to do. And there is kind of a requirement from them to do more, just to do more. Like from writing code, whether it's full stack, so front-end code together with the back-end code, And we want like real full stack. So we want them also to know their AWS magic really well, so they can set up like a full application without anyone helping them, especially in small companies and startups. And this is like I think it's an okay direction to be in for the individuals to develop a wider skill set. But if I would have to build like an engineering department today, I would not ask for all of the engineers, like 100% of the engineers, to be able to perform DevOps magic really well. The way I see it, the ratio should be something like 1 per team, as Zohar mentioned. My teams would be smaller. So Zohar, you mentioned like 20 people team. I don't know how you manage that today, but maybe like a 5 people team, like a pizza team, right? So a team,
let's say 1 per group, maybe 1 per group. It's fair enough.
Okay, so 1 per group. I would say 1 per team. So the team is kind of completely self-empowered, and DevOps would be the one kind of laying out the best, high-quality, super professional kind of infrastructure, but not infrastructure in the sense of IT only, but infrastructure in the sense of development infrastructure as well, development environment, cloud environment, and the engineers must not be kind of cut off where the ops start. So they would have to go all the way. They would have to know that when their application is crashing, they would have to be able to go into the AWS account and kind of troubleshoot and understand where everything is going and pinpoint the location where the problem is at. But they would do so together with consuming kind of high quality services provided by their DevOps infrastructure. So this is my kind of
so
my
what I
ideal
got
ratio.
is that DevOps is like pizza. That's the bottom line. You need to maintain the right ratio between pizza and people, and you need to keep it small. Otherwise, it gets messy. There's cheese and tomato sauce everywhere. I think also this kind of connects to expectations. So there's a difference between what you need at each point in time and the expectations changing. There are a couple of posts like that, but I remember the one from Tiangolo. He's the guy that created Fast API. It's a Python framework, and he shows that a job requirement post asking for 5 or 6 years of experience with Fast API, and he says, "Damn it, I can't get the job. It's only been 4 years since I created this thing." So I think it's not just about finding the right balance. It's finding the right balance at the right point in time as expectations are changing and new technologies are kind of funneling in. We're running short on time, so I think this would be a great point to move to our 4th fact. And our 4th fact is Philip.
Yep, I've got something interesting for you guys, and I'm going to kind of start the fact off by throwing a little of trivia at you. So we have about 7 billion people in the world. How many of those people use the internet? Can you guess?
60%?
Guesses? Well, give me a number in billions. Come on.
Probably over half.
Well, actually, yeah, it's much more than that. It's over 5 billion people actually have access to the internet. The thing that we have to adjust to in the dev space is that 4.5 billion of those 5 billion people access the internet on their mobile phones. So actually, what we saw recently, and that's the stats from last year. So what we saw is that there is this huge shift of people using these smaller devices to do their daily work and so on and so forth. And then what we've seen also is how these companies and how different companies actually start shifting to support and to give better experiences to the people using those devices, and how much actually attention goes onto specifically putting focus on mobile phones. Now, the other thing that came along with mobile phones and came along with all the new kind of shifts that big companies took, like, for example, YouTube or Instagram and so on, is that they really lowered people's retention rate by using mobile phones. So they don't pay, they won't spend 10 minutes reading an article anymore. They'll kind of skim through it, or they'll find a replacement video that they can watch in 30 seconds. So now I send my question out to you guys, is with being owners of companies and driving these startups, how do you battle this? How do you put practices in place where, you kind of tailor everything that you do to also the 4.5 billion people that use a mobile phone?
That's a good question. I can start with answering that you don't necessarily do. It really depends on the product that you're building. Sometimes, even though people would start exploring your product through mobile as they're discovering it, it doesn't actually mean that they'll prefer using it from mobile. And this is very apparent when you talk about developer tools. Developers obviously use their, I'm a developer, so I use my phone all the time, but you'll be hard pressed to see me writing code on my phone. Like, it's technically possible, but I'm not going to like it. I like my clickety keyboard. I like my screen setup. Yep. I'm not gonna waste my time on my phone. I have my setup and I like it. So I think it really depends on what is the product that you're actually building, and what's the audience you're catering for. I definitely agree that more discovery now happens on mobile, but that's different than building the product. That's building your marketing pipeline, getting maybe your onboarding to be mobile friendly. That's my 2 cents at least.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I feel like it is affecting the way that we build products, even products that are not mobile-first products. So obviously, yeah, writing code is not yet your go-to for the average engineer to do that on their mobile. However, and it's not just mobile. I want to say that if the average length of our attention has been shortened due to the fact that we use kind of our mobile phones, then I think like the IoT technology, like our watches and anything else that is connected to the internet, has cut this new short time span in half for sure. And I think the way that it affects the building product is our users kind of got accustomed to a new standard, to a new quality of even look and feel, a product experience in general. We can see that very clearly in the cybersecurity space. If back in the 90s, you would build security products that would look as you would expect the kind of an enterprise heavy set platform would look like, then today this is no longer the case by any means. Our users, even professional kind of engineers that are our users, they use other products on their day-to-day. They use mobile apps. They go to the social networks. They use TikTok.
They're humans.
They are accustomed to a new experience. Yeah, they're accustomed to a whole new experience as a human being. So even today, when I'm building a cybersecurity platform, I don't have kind of the privilege to do that as I would like 10, 20 years ago. So it definitely does affect the way that I'm building a product today.
Yeah, and I think a lot of companies actually implement this kind of approach without even knowing they might do, because as you can see with every kind of UI, for example, we're trying to make it as simple as possible, as like for it to require as least effort as it is physically capable for us to create, so the user won't get stuck on anything. Because as soon as we get that barrier in front of the user, they're very likely to just back away and be like, oh, maybe this is too difficult. So it's very important to kind of stress that even if, most companies, maybe they don't care that that's kind of the revolution that's coming to place of people using phones and kind of having that low retention, well, still we're actually putting it into practice maybe without even knowing it. Because it had started somewhere, right? So
right.
There you go.
Yeah, so maybe it's more not just the platform, it's around how people want to consume products. That's what's changing, not just the technical aspect of it, just their attention span, their priorities. And I think that's maybe also something that we can see being hinted at what's going to be the next revolution. And here I'm going to reference things from a previous fact, and that's, again, machine learning and AI agents. So I wouldn't be surprised if in the near future, people wouldn't just expect that the product would be simple, that they expect that the product would literally explain itself to them. And maybe they don't even have to understand it. They just tell the product what they want, and it will do that for them. So they won't have to actually learn the interface. They won't have to actually play too much with the product. They will be like, oh, this is a thing that, I don't know, makes videos about sheeps or ships. Both would work, I guess. And it'd be like, I want a sheep that is purple. Just make it happen, and you don't start clicking buttons. So I think that's maybe something that would be coming in, and will also have a very deep effect on how we're building products and how, as developers, we're connecting our APIs and interfaces to other systems. And I think maybe the other part is that how we will not only be catering to the humans, we'll be catering to their automated agents. So if now people are consuming our products through their mobiles, next time they'll be consuming them directly from their Siri or Alexa or their ChatGPTs. And that definitely is going to change the way we market to people and how we build the products. And again, this is in my mind, this is happening real soon. I think, again, we'll be starting to see this in the next couple of years, and probably by 10 years, it will be the standard. That's my, here's another prediction to test me on.
I'll keep that in mind. I'll write it. I'll remind you in 10 years. We'll test it.
So put a calendar invite.
All right. I think that kind of leaves us at the point where we can wrap up. So thank you all for joining us today. And the fact of today's episode is that the word robot originated from a Czech word that means forced labor. If you didn't know that, well, now you know. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for listening. And I will see you in the next one. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
I think this is the perfect time to wrap up the show. If you liked this podcast, tell your friends about it. If you didn't like it, tell your enemies about it.